All right. All right. So let me just kind of recap what we have talked about so far. So injuries on the right side, pelvis hip doesn't like to load. Right side is the down leg side. Hip is dropped. Left side is the up leg side, more stable. Your center is shifted to your left. Second thing, we have determined that since you have different hips, you probably have a different pelvis, and that both sides of that pelvis and both of those hips do not necessarily move in the same way. So when you're talking about your question about anterior pelvic tilt, my guess is your right side is going to be very mobile and be able to just rock out positions, but isn't going to know where it is efficient to find the load and home. And your left side's not going to be as mobile, but it's going to have a better idea of home.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at anterior tilt, and it's tricky because any position we are in, that pelvis, specifically for if we're, so body generally moves this way, and I'll know in a second. Either I have locked in ribs, tight ribs, and a very mobile pelvis, or I have a locked in pelvis and my ribs are very mobile. So you have to think of these two blocks that are constantly interacting with one another. Your body is going to find stability as a whole. We're talking top to bottom, as either my ribs are going to hold me up and I'm just going to kind of dangle and my pelvis is going to marionette, or my pelvis is going to lock down and my ribs are going to be the thing that is motion. Ideally in this situation, again, if we're talking about balance, we're talking about use, we're talking about evolution, my ribs should be able to move whatever way I need to, and my pelvis should be able to. So they should both be stabilizers and mobilizers depending on the task at hand. So the easiest way that I have found, and the most, I guess, general approaching to know if you're an anterior tilt, first and foremost, is to start on the ground.
I'm gonna go ahead and figure this out right now.
All right. And the first thing you want to do is you just want to go ahead and keep your feet on the floor and your knees bent, but just go ahead and lay and fully relax. Cool. Head as well. Now, I can kind of see from your t-shirt first and foremost. My guess is if you took your hand and you slid it underneath your low back, my guess is that there'll be a bit of a gap there.
Yep.
Yeah, and you just you sucked your whole wrist in. So in this instance right here, and again, I'm not saying that's healthy or unhealthy, but that bit of a gap, that gap is the same as if I cat-cow and I drop down.
Yeah.
It is the same as if I was upright and I stuck that booty out. That is all anterior tilt. Just want to make sure we have the terminology. So again, I'm not going to necessarily say you're stuck in it or not. We're going to find out. So from this position then, once more, just naturally lay. You want to see in a couple of ways, what is your instinct in order to make that space go away? So I'm not going to give you any tips, but laying here, how would you try to get rid of that tunnel of space? What would be your technique?
I would pressurize the stomach a little bit into it.
Okay. Now, I don't know if you're looking at me but I don't know if you notice when you did that pressurizing, your head came up. So
yeah,
my question is, can you pressurize without having that head pop up?
Yeah, I'm doing it right now.
Okay. So first strategy is I'm not going to adjust my pelvis at all. I'm just going to that gap that is there. I'm going to press down and I'm going to basically squish it.
Yeah.
Another area, another technique, another option that generally the body wants to be able to use is, am I able to actually turn the pelvis? So I go from my tailbone that is tucked into the ground, and then I'm able, you can see this actual waistband.
Yeah.
I'm actually moving my waistband. Now I'm not lifting my butt off the ground, but I'm just tilting my waistband toward my face. That now
Yes. Oh,
you,
wow, yeah, it connects it.
so
Yeah.
now you are, right now, I can't, again, because I don't necessarily have a neutral. Now you are quote unquote posteriorly tilting.
Yeah.
And then the top of your pelvis or that top of the t-shirt gets higher than the back, you are past neutral. Right now, I would say you're probably in neutral, only because again, I'm looking at your clothing and there's a pretty straight line. And now we have a little bit more going top north to south.
Yeah, my glutes are starting to fire too. Wow.
So you first and foremost, like you could get out of it. You could get out of it relatively easily. And you had two strategies. Your first strategy, you were able, and you're like, okay, I can get rid of it this way. When you added the second of the turning, all of a sudden now you were like, whoa, and again, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
So you just wanted to add this potential option of turning the pelvis on top. Now it gets tricky because like everything's a continuum, right? So let's say that I'm stuck in anterior tilt and I'm stuck in posterior tilt, right? Generally speaking, for someone to kind of learn that middle, I wish it was as gentle as this, but generally speaking in anterior, and this is where I was like, I'm stuck in anterior tilt. Like this is the worst ever. I have all these problems. It's because of anterior tilt. So then through a number of injuries, another time, I basically swapped over to posterior tilt. I took my locked in, stuck anterior pelvis, and then I made it a super mobile pelvis that mostly was able to posterior tilt. And then I was like, wait a minute, I'm having a bunch of problems here too now. It's too mobile. I can't load. Like you talk about the squat and the butt wink.
Yeah.
He was training it to just be mobile. So then I lived over there for a while. And now the key that has helped me figure out where this home is my ability to push down. And that is that loading pattern. That is the finding home. So the true north is actually gravity pushing down. That when I can actually feel and get stuff going down, now I know that I'm actually in the place that I should be.
And yeah, okay. So it's not not necessarily life or death. You just have to have the tools to understand what you're dealing with.
Yes. And you need to know, when you say like, hey, I need to adjust. And I mean, is it my low back? Is it my pelvis? When I need to adjust, do I need to expand front to back? Do I need to be able to drop one side or lift another? Do I need to be able to turn it? Do I need to be able to shift it laterally? Do I need to be able to twist and yaw? This is the wild thing about, and this is like every single joint in the body, right? Every single one has this calibration of, the roll, the pitch, the yaw, and you as the inhabitor, you could be crooked as hell, but you think it's home.
Yeah.
So even correct could feel weird, but because you haven't had the time there to normalize and manipulate that variable, we tend to like bounce in and out of it. So again, it kind of swings back and forth. And then if we continue, first and foremost, I mean, most people don't want this long of a game.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line. And I think I'm just like, dude, when the game is over, I'm dead. So people are looking to win and beat the game. And I'm just like, no, man, you just want to keep playing it. You want to keep it interesting. That's where I come from anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, that makes a lot of sense with that, especially because online they do so much fear mongering.
Yeah. I mean, when you think about why, and this is why I'll never say that like what I do is going to work for you. I don't know what's going to work for you. I'm only trying to express what works for me. I never want to convince someone that what I'm doing is the best thing for them. All I'm doing is I'm trying to learn more and more, get deeper and deeper, and have the words for it. Because it's one thing to feel it, and it's another thing to be able to communicate and translate it so somebody else can find that feeling.
That's what a lot of these questions are on, is like just the disconnect between seeing it and having it explained. So for this second question, I wrote down desires. So when I look at what I want to add, speed, fluidity, power. What does training for that in your philosophy look like?
Okay.
For the three aspects.
So for the first two, speed and fluidity, the biggest tenet of there that I had to learn and that I continue to practice is relaxation.
Yeah.
Relaxation and like, how does everything become so efficient that it's almost rest? And like studying rest, because rest is the most honest. Like, you're not trying to be nothing. If you're laying on the couch and you're like always on your right side or always on your left side, like that is a snapshot of truth for you. But people only like to look at themselves when they're working on things.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you're talking about speed and fluidity, you have to be able to relax. You have to be able to hold yourself in a way that uses as little effort as possible, but is still physically stable and able to adjust, right? So when I'm talking about speed, Adarian talks about the fall. That was like, damn, fall? Like, I've been trying to like use all this effort, and all I needed to do was position myself so my shins drop and gravity, right? And my body, he calls it crash the plane. So when my shins drop, like my body doesn't want to crash, so one of those feet are going to come up to catch me. And when it catches me, can I not pop up out of freak, and can I stay low, and can I get the other one to catch me?
Yep.
And it's similarly when you look at these sprinters who are good at sprinting and you see their face, it isn't.
Yeah.
The more tension you have, the less speed you have.
Yeah.
And this is wild because I'm literally trying to work on this with high school kids right now. And this is why I think that I am in this very peculiar place, is because I am surrounded by people who like literally want to pay me to talk to me because they're like, oh, she's got something. And then I'm surrounded by like 250 kids a day who could like really care less. So
Yeah.
one of these like,
it'd be hard for them to understand that stuff.
yeah. So it's one of those like, so this is why I don't give them this. I observe them and I see what they need, and I give most of it right now, if I'm being fully, what they need is like time to not be asked to do anything and to be with friends.
Yeah.
Like, it's that simple. So the only time I enter this world is when I have like some kids, and I have 2 weightlifting classes, and they start to ask me these questions, and then I go, and if they can stay with me, but I have to like put it into a curious teenage mind language and like use their language to give back their language in order to explain it. So this is why I feel like I can simplify things, because not only am I trying to understand it, but I am trying to figure out a way to convey it to 15-year-olds who have, who have curious minds.
Yeah.
And fluidity is another, fluidity kind of joins the mobility track, but I did that whole FRC thing, and the FRC thing is really based on tension and isolation. And fluidity is not at all tension and isolation. It is constantly handing the baton and not squeezing one for dear life. Now,
Yeah.
to recognize one isn't moving and working, that could be a tool to get it. But again, everything is sharing the load and moving with something and working with something else. So in our path to isolate, to like force that thing to work, we got to consider what are the things we're shutting off, and we don't know what we don't know. Right. So we think we got it, and then we try performance based, and all of a sudden we're like, oh, my extra mobility didn't do me any good performance wise. It's probably not the context in which mobility was the key. You probably needed stability. You just didn't know where, you didn't know where home was.
Yeah.
And when to get there and how to get there.
Yeah.
But now we're talking about motor programming and your body's operating system. Now we're on a whole different track, right? Because if my body operates on one way and I have my language and my perspective, and your body is operating another way, again, I can't use that same tools. I can't use that same context. Like, the way I work with people is I need to get into your head. And that's why I ask you questions, and you try to communicate sensations so I can know where that means, and I can get into my body and I can explain through my body. This is like, I can't explain things that I can't do.
Yeah.
But the things I can do, I can develop 50 different ways to put it out there.
Absolutely. Wow.
And the thing when you talk about power, now that power is a timing thing. Power is, how do I get the most force in the fastest amount of time? and what is locking up or jamming up or colliding, as Adarian would say, at the right time. That's power is a timing thing. So not only can I generate force, can I generate it through the right place at the right time with relaxation on either end of it.
So would you train power with a brick and chain?
You could. Now when I watch Adarian, I know that's what he's doing when he's like leaving and he's actually having that foot leave. And there's this kind of, he is so in tune that he could do that at the moment. I personally cannot. I am not there yet. But anything, I mean, you could conjure up things, but anything where you are looking at contraction times and places and points where things are leaving and then directly going back down, because again, everything goes back into your ability to go down.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I
And
think that's one thing that I got taught from this other guy who's with your philosophy. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but he literally told me, he's like, you should be doing this on always like a bed or a soft surface. But he said, this is all, he's like, dude, this is all sports are. I don't know why you lift weights. All sports is this contraction. That's all it is.
And so when I think about what that is and what that's doing, in order for you in that soft surface, in order for you to lift and pop up that front leg, you got to know how to load that back leg without shooting the whole system up.
Yeah. And that's why everything you're saying now is making a lot of sense about the right side. Because if I were to do a contraction with my right side being heavy, right, this back leg can hold it real well, but the motor control's tougher on the front end.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's there are so many like data points and manipulations that can be done if you wanted to pursue your right being able to do what your left does.
Yeah.
The number one thing that you're going to have to look at is how do I shift my center? How do I, because again, it's got to be that continuum game. Because right now your body thinks your true middle is over there.
Yeah.
So I haven't found to be able to go from there to there into the true middle. Your body, you're not going. Most people aren't sophisticated enough to know. So you're going to have to go here to find where that is.
Yeah, almost
orient
correct, and then meet.
And orient that, and then because I mean, it could be, is it internal external rotation of the hip? Is it left to right shift of the hip? How do you, and what I am piecing together right now, how do I get that right side, which is also my down leg, how do I get that to suck into my body instead of always splay out?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's kind of like, and where I'm kind of at right now, okay, so I need to actually expand the pelvis on that side and like tuck in the hip. And that's happening in a variety of ways to create, because again, if I'm always following this guy, then there is going to probably be like, this is the end all, there is going to be some shortening or shrinking into that. So what I'm looking at is how do I actually expand that right side of my body and then let the hip that doesn't keep dangling, let the hip suck in. So now I have this tension on all forms in all areas in all directions.
And then, so for the third question, so knowing what I want to train for, knowing also taking into account of what I have going on with the tear, even though I don't want to baby it, I know it's not good to baby it. In your opinion, what should a daily routine look like? Or every other day, but just kind of the routine. Like, what are some of the different things I should be trying to hit, throughout the day?
So it's kind of a big question. It's kind of a loaded question.
Very loaded, yeah.
But the central tenet that I can come back to is how do I load that right side?
Yeah.
So whatever, if I'm doing a bench press, how do I load that right? When I'm on that bench, how do I make sure my right scapula, my right PSIS, my right lower back. How do I make sure that that is engaged? And then that is where I'm feeling that load. If I'm doing a deadlift, right? If I'm doing a deadlift, right? This is it's flipped. So this is the left side. For all ages, when I went down, loading my right, literally was my hips didn't move, but that felt great. Just like taking my torso and sliding it over. And then I had to learn, oh, like then what I'm learning in my right side, long story short, I was pigeon-toed on this side. And now I know I go to works. I know I go to works because on that pigeon toe, which is my left, which is my true center, what I was getting at was pressurizing that outer MTP. And then I realized literally the last couple of days, I'm like, oh snap, like that tells you what the center is. So even though this right side was straight the whole time, when I try and go back, it's only big toe. This side, both. So once I started to pressurize this outer MTP and make sure, and I had to start like this to find it, then I'm like, oh, and all of a sudden, now it's at my midline. So it was like click, 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 click. So I don't know if that's the thing that's going to click, but you're going to start to feel. But so when you say, what should I do? I literally just always want to be connected to how do I load that right side? And it's not something that you could just like think yourself into for 20 hours a day. It's you're washing dishes, you take it, oh, dang, like I'm totally on my left. How do let me shift it right. Or when you realize that one hip is into the counter and one spins off of it. It could be washing the floor. It could be picking something up off the ground. The only thing I could really direct you with certainty is learn how to load that. When I say right side, I mean that hip. I mean, even look at your resting position right now, right? If you turn the on you, you notice how you're specifically slanted in a certain way. Again, I'm not
into the left.
Yeah, and I'm not like because you're loading it, so you're unloading. Typically, when you unload, you lift. So it's one of those things to be like, huh, and for me, just because I'm kind of weird, is all right, I don't necessarily need to reverse it, but how do I make that less?
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
I think single leg glute bridges could be really big for me.
yeah, and yes, and what about how that foot is connected to the ground? What about that pelvic tilt or that pelvic expansion? What about that rib cage? Like, what about your neck position? So yeah, it's the really thing, and I'm hearing myself say it, and it has no detail, but really all it is do that thing and have this intent and have this focus.
Yeah,
and
it's so neurological, really. All this, so that's going to be a big key is getting back into just getting into pressurizing my foot again, just getting on my brick first thing. But now when I'm doing my brick work, I want to really have it in. Like, don't just be getting stable on the left side, like really start loading it, getting into the glute, into the hamstring. That's another thing I needed to ask you is how can you open up the ability to load the Achilles? Because I can load it, but not with the economy that I want to.
I would say before you go Achilles, go hamstring. So something that blew my mind was, so I blew out my left, which is my up leg, which is my load leg. I blew out that left hamstring, ACL, right? They took a hamstring graft. So you would think that hamstring is shot, but my body uses that left hamstring as the loading side, which even though it's like a completely different hamstring than my right that didn't have any issue. My right side, my back leg, and I kind of noticed it on you as well. I use my calf all the time for basically everything. And the calf and the Achilles, right? Not the same thing. And I got big old mega calves and like trying to get my Achilles to thin and trying to get, everything tight. The calf wants to overload because it can, it does all the load. So and this happened with learning to load my right side, but how do I get that hamstring to lock in? Because if I can get the hamstring, then now I'm getting compression. If I can get compression, now I can start tinkering with that tension.
I see what you're saying. What are some of the easiest ways? So like, let's say you're doing a workout. What are some of the easiest ways to get hamstring compression going? Or what was your path to compressing the hamstring?
My path. Well, I have a Adarian who like comes and visits. So,
Yeah.
Usually he just like tosses all like tosses everything he's got, and then I have to distill it. I would say just learning the feeling of the chain work, where you have your upper body and your ribs pulling you up, your heel is up, and you are actually compressing that hip down.
Yeah.
That was like my number one. Oh, then once I did it with the chains, then I started doing with the squat pattern, then I started doing with the hip, like with the deadlift, excuse me, everything has to revolve around feeling that new sensation and then trying to replicate it across the board.
Yeah. Because that is huge, because that's another thing that's interesting. You said with the heel off, another huge issue I have is I was always a really good athlete, but I was unathletic, if that makes sense. Like really good moves, really good everything, but didn't have the speed, the jumping, the fast twitch muscles. The way I acquired all those things was training on the balls of my feet. I would never let my heels touch training. So everything I did, whether it was, lymphatic hops, whatever, heels were never touching. Now in football, when they put you in the weight room, everything you do is putting loads back on your heels, which makes no sense because the game is played on the balls of our feet. So that's another, big issue that's really dogmatic.
It is something though to consider. If we were never supposed to load them at all, we probably wouldn't have them located as
As anchors, yeah.
because think about it, let's peel back. If you're only on the balls all the time, no option, how could you access really? How could you really learn that hamstring that has to be loading the backside of that body in some way? You would be all quad. You would be, if you think about the foot, right? Front side, backside.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that you always want to be on your heels either, but there is a balance. So there's a difference between ball of foot here, and ball of foot where that heel is light or barely off the ground.
Ooh. So you think maybe I have issues compressing the hamstring because I've gotten so front.
Your fulcrum or your tipping point, you're too frontal.
Yeah, no.
And then when you think about glute ham raisins and things like that, because you're not on your feet, because you're not upright, you are isolating that back part of the body unless you're doing glute hams from the ball of your foot, right? So it's one of those things. Again, it's that continuum. How do I have access to both and use both when and where I need them? Because you want to do, even like, I remember I was doing heavy squats after coming off a bit of a back tweak. And, I was at this gym and it looked like this. So it looked, and I was like, oh. And when I did this, I went heel down, and then I let it come forward, and I had full fluidity, not even that tweak. And I was like, oh, something to that. And that was only 2
Yeah.
So again, it's the when and the how. How do I disperse that load? Because I don't want this to do everything. And if I do, what could happen is I could get that heel, kind of what you saw on that first about to take off. That heel is so high, I can't get much from the backside, leverage wise. If I think about the fulcrum and the physics.
So I've heard that stretching isn't really that great because our mobility comes from our ability to trust the foot, and specifically the big toe, because it sets the midline. What could I work to address my stiffness issues? So one thing is, I've never been able to get into a deep squat, not once in my life. I can get down to there, and then I feel the craziest pinch. But then if I just get off my heels just a little bit,
So you're able to use that. Where do you feel the craziest pinch?
So like,
But like where in your body?
so right here, just a bite, right on my hip flexors, just a
Okay.
bite. Yeah.
So I would say that's probably more the pelvis.
Yeah.
Because if you, this has to do with everything being on the front side. If I am asking the thing that I'm asking to hold me up to now also pull me down, of course there'll be a pinch. I'm not creating any bounce to the backside. What should be pulling you down is your hamstrings.
Oh my God. Yeah.
And that has to do with the compression factor.
That's exactly it then. Yeah, because I'm trying to, even when I'm like loading vertical jumps, anything, yeah, it's something trying to account for something that's locked up. That's crazy.
And this is the whole thing about, do you need mobility? Can you use the lack of mobility to inform you about what mechanism isn't working?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, so it's really the hamstring compression is really going to be key.
Even too, when you think about anterior tilt, like, and the position there, getting those hamstrings to pull you down will also settle that pelvis.
Yeah.
It'll adjust it.
So I had kind of an interesting, cool, like sport specific, position specific question. So as a wide receiver, I don't know if you're a big football fan, but so much of what we're doing is running routes. Like we're never just running straight. We're dropping our hips. We're juking this, that. How could I train or condition my hips? Because for me, that's really what I need them to do, to drop and move laterally, both drop and move laterally in the most efficient way possible.
We already said it. Hamstring compression.
Yeah.
You're not just trying to marinate it from the front side. You want that back side to also, when you think about a hinge. That's what a drop is, where you can actually stop on a dime.
Yes. Damn. So once I can really engage the hamstrings, that's when a lot of stuff will.
I mean, should everything cascade positively? Like I don't want to, theoretically, it makes a ton of sense to me. And I would say it very.
That's absolutely what it is. That as soon as I just needed to hear it get put together like that, but that was like the missing, I guess, overarching analysis of a bunch of little shit that I've dealt with throughout the years. So yeah, totally. I'm just that road to compression. I think it's gonna help. I'm building a brick and chain type device. So I think that'll help.
It's super easy, like, so I don't know if you got like Harbor Freight by you. You can put these wherever you want. I was lazy. I had a hole and I only wanted to buy one of these things. So I put it in the middle. You can put it on the edges. You can put it on the sides. You just get this eyelet and screw it in there.
Yeah.
And then you have a chain. I would probably get 2 chains. I got mine from Harbor Freight. And again, even to give you like, there isn't even instructions like, hey, feel it.
Yeah.
You want to make sure that there isn't slack in the whole point of the chain is there should be no slack in the chain.
Yeah, tension and compression. Yeah. And I think, so I think probably in terms of getting the posterior stronger and maybe starting that path to hamstring compression, I'm thinking probably start out with like, do you think single leg glute bridges or single leg glute bridge holds would be better for sort of teaching it how to compress?
I would go back to this guy or go back to, I didn't start here only because of the effect of gravity. Because when you say compress, right, you're laying horizontal, right? And you're trying to, and gravity is pulling you a certain way. So I'm a big fan of like finding the position, which is what these are, finding the position in which you really do feel that hamstring pull you down. And so I would, if you're gonna go with the glute stuff, holds, right? To kind of maybe compare, but very different when it's on your feet. And if what you're going for is on your feet, try to find it on your feet.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think maybe in like one interesting isometric that the other trainer I would love. I'm gonna contact him about this because I would love to see you guys like have a conversation together because I don't think anyone else is on your guys' wavelength. But he was huge on doing isometrics, like stuff like this, but using the ball of the foot to pull yourself into the ground.
So
And
that's,
then,
yeah, so that's another way of going down.
yeah,
Right. So it's along the same line. So you have internal resistance, again, pulling you towards center.
yeah,
Or you can have, because the thing that most people are doing is they're pulling off the ground, they're pulling off the ground, they're pulling off the ground. So they're kind of, again, you want to latch onto the ground internally
yeah.
and then be able to cycle those legs through.
And that, yeah, I think that gives from the ground up, I think that does give an easy access at getting that compression feel.
Sure.
Like even after doing that little movement, like now you can kind of see I can get into it and squeeze, get the hamstring going now.
Yeah, so if you added the component of the chains to that exact same thing, which is
Yeah.
super simple, you'll be like, oh,
Yeah.
you're gonna feel that light up all the way through.
Yeah. Okay, I bet. Yeah. Cool. Are you guys big on like reps times sets, or are you more chasing a sensation?
I can only speak for myself. Definitely sensation.
Okay. Yeah. And how do you know when to move on? So do you look at it as I'm gonna go through this workout to activate X, Y, and Z?
I personally don't have a planned workout. I go in now sometimes what I am doing, like I know the kids are going to be sent through this thing, which I did 25, 30 years ago. And so I will do that to help communicate and inform and just to see what my body is capable of.
Yeah, cool.
It's everything when my attention and my sensation is no longer firing, no longer interested, I stop it. I can really hold it for, I just find it and let it go. Sometimes I find it and want to do it in another context. But once I find it, I kind of memorize it. And like, I just want that to stay with me. And I want
to download it, really.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
And I mean, I wish I had a bunch more time to continue because you're super rad. But I do have a few things that I have to get back to at this time. Any final things or like final thought comments? Or
really just thank you so much. And obviously I'm gonna continue looking at the content and now I feel like I got a clear picture on it, but you know, hopefully we can do this again like next month or something and I'll have a good update for you.
Sure. Yeah.
Continue to look at your work and I'd love if I could get not just the recording, but those stills you took of me in the loading position.
Absolutely. And you have a before and after comparison.
Yeah, and I have some stuff. I have some good stills of myself that I've taken sprinting and stuff that kind of show heel things that I think you would find interesting. So I'll send you those as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll let it download and probably in a few hours once I finish my next thing, I'll send them over to you.
Cool. Thank you so much. I appreciate
it. Super great to meet you and chat with you. I look forward to next time.
Yeah, it'll be fun. Thank you so much.
Here.
Bye.
Bye-bye.